So delighted now to be joined by David Connors of the Tuam Herd to look back on the Galway Senior Hurling Championship quarterfinals over the weekend. Safe to say, David, like looking at those quarterfinals over the weekend, there was really some incredible individual performances, you could say, throughout all the quarterfinals.
Yeah, for sure, Paul. And I suppose the one that's going to grab the headlines is probably Joe Kenning straight away for what he produced for Portumla. It was incredible, really, just to witness it. And I suppose, you know, a lot of people would be saying afterwards, like, geez, he still has plenty to offer on that evidence for, he's plenty to offer maybe a Galway team in the future with what he offered at the weekend. But, I'd say maybe in his own mind that day is done. But yeah, between himself, particularly in Ballinasloe on Sunday, then Jamie Ryan followed it up with, another mesmerising performance as well. 5 points in play, just some spectacular moments throughout the game. His pace and directness, and shooting ability. And I suppose they were the top two. I suppose the two games on the Saturday, maybe not so much individual performances. They were probably, the weather didn't help, and there were probably more dogfights, and just probably need to win. But Sunday in particular was a pleasure to watch Joe Kenning and Jamie Ryan in particular.
Particularly the first half of that game, was just watching it on the streaming service. And some of the frees even Joe Canning's getting, like, against the breeze, just over with ease. Then the sideline, you're thinking against the breeze. And I think everyone was just in awe. Like, even Sarah Farr referenced on the commentary, like, that's worth the admission fee alone. Like, would you be happy to see Joe Canning if he was to, I suppose, make a dramatic return to the inter-county scene? Because, like, going on that performance, there's no reason why he shouldn't, like, I suppose, try again with the talent he has.
Absolutely. I think the whole county and maybe even the country would be love to see Joe Kenning back in a Galway jersey. But like, I just from his comments, in recent months since he's retired, I can't imagine a return. But you'd be surprised. I think his body's gone through a lot. He's played a lot of hurling. I think he was playing for Portumla when he was 15 or 16. The winning All Ireland, he'd long club seasons. Then towards the end of his career, he picked up a couple of fairly serious injuries as well. So, maybe he's closing the door. I don't think anyone in Galway would be against the idea of Joe Kenning coming back. But I'd say probably just, personally, maybe he doesn't feel like it anymore. Maybe he feels his time is up. I think he referenced, in an interview I heard before along the lines that maybe he didn't want to, unless he was going back in terms of the inter-county setup, he'd want to play every game, like, and whether he'd be happy with coming on maybe with 15, 20 minutes to go when the game opens up. I don't know. By the sounds of it, he probably wouldn't, but you'd never know. Look, I imagine Henry Shefflin would probably approach him for a conversation anyway, and, at least test the waters. But whether that door is open, I'm not so sure. I suppose only Joe knows that, really, to be honest with you. But his form this year has been really good. In particular, that was his best performance at the weekend. It was his best performance in quite a while for Portumla. Like, Portumla this year had been, it's been really team orientated. It hasn't been relying on Joe to rack up 15 points a game. You've had several other players step up to the plate, but on Sunday, it was once again it was the Joe show. We'll say incredible, as you said, sidelines, frees, catching puck outs, assisting people, winning his own frees, scoring them, and some of the striking, as you said, against the breeze was incredible. He's a lovely trajectory in his strike. He doesn't, like, some free takers maybe hit it a tad too high, but like, he just kind of just seems to sail lovely over the bar. So, which is, he's like years of experience of taking frees now at this point, so he probably knows every trick in the book and how to deal with the elements. And my God, he had no issues at the weekend in dealing with them anyway.
I presume from being at the game, like, you can obviously only see so much on the streaming service, but even, I suppose, you're probably nearly looking at stages of the battle between maybe Joseph Cooney and Joe Canning rather than the ball sometimes, just, I suppose, with the two kind of hurdlers there.
Yeah, well, Joe didn't go on him until until I think it was the second half. Even
Yeah.
they did. Sarsfields didn't make the switch until he was on Cathal Dillon beforehand, and you'd have to feel for Cathal Dillon. Like it's when Joe was in the mood. Like it's there's inter-county defenders that wouldn't have stopped him. All Stars wouldn't have stopped him when he was in that form. But when they switched, when they switched Joseph Cooney across, it did. It did become a more even playing field, and Joseph, in fairness to him, he did kind of shut him down, and that was the platform for Sarsfields coming forward. Now Joe still, he still had these moments. Even when Joseph came across, he sent a lovely diagonal ball at one point. He was out in front for a puck out. He turned Joseph over down near the stand sideline as well, where he fairly hit him with a shoulder. So yeah, no, it was a cracking battle. It's the stuff at this time of year now where you're in the business into the championship and you're watching these matchups and they become a lot more clear, and the importance of getting them right is huge. Like it's like if they didn't maybe switch Joseph Cooney back on Joe, maybe it could have been a lot more close down the home stretch, and maybe the upset was there. Like it's for 50 plus minutes there was only a score in it, and when you have a player like Joe Kenning on the field, there's always the capability for a bit of magic. So yeah, no, it was an intriguing battle, hugely physical, two fantastic players going at it, and probably the one of the best parts of the season so far.
Yeah, as you mentioned there, the difference really seemed to be, I suppose, after the 52nd minute in that game, Sark points to 1.
Yeah, that's it. Like Sarsfields probably maybe Portumna ran out a small bit of steam as well. They had been playing in Senior B this year, and for Sarsfields they were in the group of death firstly, with Thurlock, Clarinbridge, Thomas's, that heavily weighted group towards that side. So they would have been, they would have had to give 65-minute performances in all their games, whereas maybe Portumna, when you're playing maybe Senior B opposition, you probably, you can maybe switch off and maybe you could have your game won before the final whistle, in a lot of cases. But yeah, it was that one. As you said, it was 6 points to 1. They probably just had that bit of extra quality all over. Alex Kinnear came to the fore for finish. Niall Morrissey was deadly accurate on the freeze. I suppose maybe another element of being maybe Sarsfields did spurn 3 goal chances as well. Like Mark O'Regan had a ball that he maybe could have batted in, just kind of overran. Or sorry, it was Darren Murphy, I think, that he could have batted in that just overran him. And Kevin Cooney missed 2 goal chances as well. So maybe on that element it could be closer. I suppose Sarsfields maybe have a stronger bench as well. It's to be expected at the same time. And Portumna did lose Martin Dolphin, their designated sweeper, a huge loss after 11 minutes. Like you're taking out one of your most experienced players from a young team. He came off, and they had to sacrifice Martin too. He backed away then, and Martin too had a really good game, but you probably lose his bit of energy around midfield at the same time, and I suppose that probably told for a finish as well.
Yeah, Kevin Cooney, like, he scored so frequently, but you kind of just felt for him because, like, he still played so well, but like there was just like a couple of shots, even the goal where he powers through an exit move and kind of like bats it down towards the ground, and it was nearly kind of the AstroTurf, I don't know, or something in Duggan Park that just kind of took it wide.
Yeah. In fairness to Kevin Cooney, he was he was up against a fierce competitor of the weekend in Conor O'Hare, the Portumna captain. Conor O'Hare had a fantastic game. I thought he was, after maybe Joe, he was probably he was definitely among the top 3 or 4 players for Portumna anyway. Really kind of shut down Kevin Cooney outside those couple of chances, and I know Kevin Cooney had a hand in Mark O'Regan's goal as well. But yeah, that's it. Like, Kevin Cooney has been in red hot form. So like when Portumna can come away and Kevin Cooney has to score, do you think that's a huge win for them, and a big step? But they still had other players who stepped up, like your Darren Murphy, who's been a revelation since he's come onto the senior side. You've obviously Mark O'Regan, who got the goal. Alex Kinnear is, he's one of the brightest prospects in Galway, I suppose. He's a lovely hurler. And then you've Niall Morrissey, deadly Eckerts on the freeze, and you've players who could score from deep as well in your Niall Quinns and maybe Joseph Cooney's at the same time. So they have a lot of options there, Sarsfields, and a lot of threats. So shutting down Kevin Cooney is one thing, but then you have other scorers as well at the same time. And as you said, like, Kevin Cooney was probably a little unlucky with his couple of chances, but I suppose you probably have to take them. And this time of year, there were 2 chances he probably should have scored, and probably will look back and he'd be disappointed with that he missed them.
But Sarsfields, like when you're, I suppose, looking after that game, they've obviously drawn Thomas's now in the semi-final. But do you think they'll be content enough? Because if you consider last year, like they narrowly missed out of getting out of their group, and you could say in that game, like things weren't going their way for periods of that game, and like they just kind of like dug it out as we mentioned there in the last 10 minutes.
Yeah, they will. Like this was a really tricky game. Like you're huge favourites on paper to win it. Everyone is saying these Portumna have come from Senior B. All right, they've had a great year, but it's a huge step up, and it is a huge step up. There's no point saying otherwise. But Portumna were carrying huge momentum. It a perfect winning record. They'd beaten Crowell in a dog fight. Some of their really young players were in great form. They won an under 20 B title, I think it was this year as well. So they've got into that habit of winning, which is a great thing to have. And as we see with teams that won intermediate in Galway in the past, I'm not comparing Portumna to teams that have won intermediate, but that winning, getting a bit of momentum and winning a couple of games and winning, just going on a winning streak can do a lot for confidence. So yeah, it's actually to be contented with, to get over the line, but like contented if their year ends, it's Thomas in the semi-final, they won't be content. I'd imagine like Aidan Donoghue and Joseph Cooney and all these fellas, they have their eyes on winning a county title now at this point. You don't get like that would have been their aim at the start of the year. I know they only got out of the group, or they failed to get out of the group last year, and it was cruel circumstances, and it's probably a kind of an unfair system the way the amount of senior B teams came out last year, and Sarsfield should have come out because they were in the top 12 teams in the county undoubtedly, and who knows what would have happened in the knockouts. But from the start of the year, Sarsfield they would have set out their stall. Like you look at their squad, like it's Thomas's aside, maybe like, and even at that, like Thomas, they'd fancy beating every other team in the competition on their given day, and they they shown at the start of the year they're capable of matching Thomas's in the first group game, and had they scored 2 penalties, they would have beaten Thomas's in the opening round, and it wouldn't have been Turlock that ended the winning run. So yeah, like they've had Sarsfields would be content to get over Portumna, but if they don't get their hands on the Tom Cannon Cup, like Clarinbridge, like Loughrea, like St. Thomas's at this point, they probably won't class it as a successful year, truth be told.
If we're to touch now on their opponents, Thomas's, is the narrative really of this game got the job done? There was a bit of a comeback, you could say, by Captagal, but maybe a lot of people, I suppose, would have expected Captagal to be a bit closer. Like it never really looked too much in doubt, you could say, for Thomas's over the weekend.
Yeah, they just have this habit of, when the door of opportunity opens for an opposition team, they find a way to slam it shut again. Like it's, just out of nowhere, like, just a simple move. Bernard Burke is coming through the centre. Oisin Flannery and Dara Burke are involved. The next thing, the ball's in the back of the net. And instead of being like 4 points down, you're 7, and majority of your good work is undone. Like it is a case of that. Like Cappy are, probably like maybe looking on the evidence of the last 2 years, and maybe Cappy's chance is gone. Like it's cruel, really. The element of sport, like they've made 4 semi-finals in 4 years, and now they've 2 successful knockouts, and they've probably looked further away than they've been since they've gone on this magical run. They got, as you said on Thomas's, they got the job done. They weren't particularly good, but they probably didn't need to be particularly good either. Like Cappy, like, to be fair, they looked fairly limited. It was an average performance. Like you look down through it there, it's like Niall Collins a pint, Dara Dolan a pint, Dan Nevin a pint from play. I know he scored a free as well. Liam Collins only got a pint from play, and Jam Mannion didn't score. Like, so, like to beat Thomas's, that's never going to be enough. Like, you need goals probably, especially coming in as an underdog, and even at this time of year. And like some of the errors at the start of the game, like they handed Thomas's 3 or 4 scores. A couple of puck outs went astray. A couple of balls to hand didn't stick. They were turned over and they ended up in scores, and they're draining of morale. When incidents like that happen during a game. And Thomas's are, when they have the foot on the throat, they're very good at finishing the job off. And as we've seen over the past 4 or 5 seasons now, they've just become accustomed to knowing how to get the job done. And this was another occasion of that.
Just a moment I want to talk about in that game, because I seen you had the clip up over the weekend of James Skell's save, which is just remarkable. Like if people haven't seen it, they should definitely go and check it out on David's Twitter. But it's another former Galway player, I suppose, showing a moment of brilliance.
Yeah, he's not finished yet, is he? So it's it was a stunning save. Like, there's no point in saying otherwise. Like, it's point blank. It's on the 21-yard line. It's Connor Cooney, firing it. Like, so it's not going to be coming at you, slowly or anything like that. And he still managed to get contort his body, but like the funny thing was, like, he didn't even, like, he's classic goalkeeper, just jumped up straight away and was looking for the ball to buck it out again. Like, there was no celebration, like, or anything like that. Maybe he didn't even realize how good a save it was, but stunning save, yeah, like, incredible reflexes, like, and really good, really good. Like, one of the highlights of the weekend for sure. And I suppose when he looks back, he'd be delighted with it. But at the end of the day, his team were out of the championship, and maybe another day it might have been match defining, but on Saturday it wasn't, unfortunately.
Is it I suppose you could nearly say with Thomas's over the last few years, like they've got injuries at the start of the year, but whatever way it's came, like these injuries, I suppose the players who have been injured have come back at the right time. Like you're looking at Fintan Burke from a few years ago, he came back around this stage. And like a player like Shane Cooney now to come back, like I know he only came on at the weekend, but it's still huge.
Absolutely, yeah. Like, and Victor Burke came back on as a sub in that county final, and when Thomas's were maybe a bit under the cosh, he won a couple of balls, and I think he scored a point. He definitely set up a couple of scores anyway, and I think he might have set up the crucial goal. I think it was Aon that got it on the day. So yeah, like, you've Shane Cooney back now as well. Like, what a player to be able to bring on, and like, he looked pretty good when he came on. He looked in good shape. He did a couple of nice things. He lovely hand pass. I think that was, in difficult conditions, it looked good as well. Like, and like, even if you're not bringing on Shane Cooney to play six, maybe it's a bit early for that. Like, there's the option there to bring him on at cornerback or wing back or something like that. Like, and tie up a player, and for an All Ireland run, maybe, like, we saw last year he was missing against Ballyhale, and maybe if Shane Cooney was playing, it might have been a different story. Maybe it might have been a point or two in the difference for a finish. And like, TJ's last minute free mightn't have mattered. It's those fine margins, but like, Thomas's are, like, they're brilliant at this time of year. Like, there's no point saying otherwise. They can beat you in the summer, and they can beat you in the winter. Like, they're well capable of dogging it out as well. And having a player Shane Cooney's power and strength and hurling ability at this time of year to be able to come on, and if they're under the cosh, like, it's a huge boost to the team and supporters to see a player that quality coming on. So yeah, they've had injuries, they've coped with them, and even this year again, like, they've been, like, Mark Caulfield started the last day. I think the Clarinbridge game was his first start of the year. I think he started at number 6, and he was wing back the last day, and he was on James Egan, or I think he was on James Egan the last day, and did really well. Like, so you have Victor Manzo coming on. He's got a couple of goals this year as well. They're gradually, every year, it's one or two of these lads kind of coming through and adding to the squad, and competition for places, and they have a couple of options now that they can bring on off the bench, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, as you mentioned there, Victor Manzu, Mark Caulfield, you're looking at Connor Head, John Head, like these players coming through. Like, it's such an easy thing to say, like, to be bringing through. I suppose every club should be bringing through players, but like, it's just, that's where you have to put your hats off to Thomas's, because like every year it's one or two players coming through, and it's like, it's not as if all these players are young lads. Like Mark Caulfield would still be around in his mid-20s. Like, you don't see many clubs doing, I suppose, what Thomas's are doing.
Yeah, it's difficult, I suppose. Like, Thomas's are probably lucky that they have one or two coming through every year, because a lot of teams, maybe, especially rural clubs, maybe they don't, but between immigration and, lads moving to Dublin or Limerick or Cork or places like this for work, like, whereas, like, I suppose in a Thomas's, perspective, I suppose winning helps, you know what I mean? The likelihood you're probably going to be in a county semi-final, and there's probably a good chance you'll be picking up your county medal. Whereas, maybe if you're languishing in Senior B, or the bottom ends of Senior A, and you're unlikely to win anything, maybe it's a bit harder to keep these lads and bring them through. But the Thomases have been brilliant at that. Like, the team has changed quite a lot since it's changed remarkably over the last few years. Even at that, like I know it's the same pace, it's still doing it, but there's still one or two coming through. As you said before, like we just like Ushing Flannery, Evan Duggan give them a huge boost 1 year. Like there's John Head coming through. There's Gerald Kelly came in for James Barrett another year. There's all these kind of players that are gradually coming through. Damien McGlynn, has been in and out of the team. This year he's kind of staked the place and cemented himself as a starter as well at the same time. So there's all these options, and I suppose, as you said, it's what other clubs aren't able to do it, but like you have that carrot of saying, look, the likelihood is we'll probably be in a county semi-final minimum, and if there's a good chance here we'll be winning, you'll get your hands in the county middle. So if you wait around and you come to training and you come to the challenge games and you play a few of the league games while a few of the county lads are absent, there is that chance that you can break in. Like Mark Caulfield was playing junior A at the start of the year. He was playing in I think it was quarter final against Lee Mellows. He was centre back. And maybe they didn't want to use him in the early stages of the group, but he played exceptional in that game, and it's probably one of the reasons that Kenneth Burke has shown faith in him, because Kenneth was playing for the junior A's that day as well, so he saw up close and personal how good Mark Caulfield has been, and he's a huge man. Like he must be 6 foot. He must be 6'6". Like what a player to bring back, and he's well able to hurl. And I suppose he's added a bit of aggression to his game this year, which is good. Like because Mark's an awful nice fella, and maybe that was lacking, but the bit of aggression has really stood him this year. And going up against someone like James Egan, as experienced as him for Capatagan, you get nothing easy there. So if you're not willing to dig in, you'll be showing up. And Mark definitely wasn't at the weekend, and he's taken place. And look at his likelihood; he's probably going to start the semi-final on the evidence of what he's shown so far over the last 2 games.
With as well, like Thomas's, like you referenced Ballyhale, like they probably won't say it publicly, but they probably are thinking of it now, and probably, I suppose, rubbing their hands, thinking of the chance of redemption. But like, if they break through this year, win the Tom Callanan Cup, like they 100% have to be in the conversation then for, I suppose, the greatest Galway club hurling team, because like it'd be some achievement, like yourself, I suppose, from coming from that area.
Yeah, it would. Like, and I suppose you can be a bit biased too when you're from that area and you see it. Like, and I suppose All Ireland's are the currency though. Like at the end of the day, like the county titles are unbelievable, but like in terms of being judged as the very, very best club teams, if they could add a second one to that, if they could, like it would be, it would definitely rank you up there, given the caliber teams that are out there at the moment in terms of club sides. Like you look down through like Ballygunner, the Pearshig, like if they meet in Munster, it's going to be incredible. Like you've Ballyhale in Leinster, like and then you have like you've really good teams up the north as well, like that are well capable of, like if you have to play them in. And I think it is the Ulster team that the Connacht side are playing this year as well, which the Galway side, should I say, will be playing. So you'll have a real war there. I think that I'll be honest with you though, I honestly believe when they do say that, they probably don't think about it. Like they have a lot of work to do yet. Like Sarsfields are going to be a really sticky test. Like it's not this, you're going to get absolutely nothing easy there. A lot of these lads might have went, they know each other from county underage panels. A few of them might have went to school with one another. They know each other well. Like, and Sarsfields won't fear Thomas's, and Thomas's won't fear Sarsfields either. Like, but it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard earned at this point. And I suppose there is the carrot there of, you speak of the greatest club teams ever. Thurlock have won 6 in a row. Like, so it's, from that Thurlock team of the 60s, I'm right in saying. So like there's that element if you want to match it, but you have to win the 5 first before you can win 6. Like, so it's I suppose they're like, one thing about them, and they always reference, is like this won't be around forever, this golden generation. Like Thomas's are probably playing, they're probably playing a lot of B championships underage. They're not winning much, like like they're competing in B, but their like success is fairly limited. Like they might have 1 or 2 strong hurlers in each team, like, but a few of the lads like might drift away, and they mightn't be good enough to compete and break in at this level. But so it is about winning all you can while you can, and they're a very hungry bunch. Like there's no point, like you don't win this amount. What is it? It's 6 county titles in 10 years. You don't win that without being hungry. Like, so. And I suppose maybe when they were a bit younger, they thought, success would come quite easily, but they had a couple of lean years in as well. So we see now that they're a more mature group, and like you've leaders like David Burke and Conor Cooney and Dara Burke, like, and fellas like this, like just like warriors in the field, like, and I suppose, like I wouldn't hear too much talk about winning All Ireland at this point. I think most of the parish would be, would be discussing about winning the county title again beforehand. But that is a huge carrot if you do win it. Like you have a shot at redemption, and you probably a good chance of making Croke Park again in the All Ireland final, because you are playing the Ulster team, and no disrespect to them, like a Galway team should fancy their chances against them. Regardless of all the four that are left, be it Clarinbridge, be it Loughrea, be it Sarsfields, they will fancy having a cut of a Northern team and making it if they do win the Tom Cannon Cup. But that's the prize on offer at the moment, is the one they're going to be targeting, all the four teams left in it.
The curtain raiser, obviously, Sarsfields and Thomas's on Sunday in Pearse Stadium. Like you mentioned there, Thomas's got the job done, maybe weren't overly impressive at periods at the weekend. A lot to work on for Sarsfields, but like at the same time, Thomas's are going to be raging hot favourites, so it kind of feels like somewhat of a shot to nothing for Sarsfields.
Absolutely, and Jesus, there's no any team that'll relish at that. It's Sarsfields. Like there's never been much between these teams when they've played. Like they've met in a semi-final a few years back as well. I think it was 2018. They met in the semi-final, and Thomas has got a couple of goals. I think it was Jarrah Burke and Brendan Farrell that got them, and that guided them home. Like so, like you just go down through it. Like there's going to be some serious matchups. Like you likely have maybe Darren Morrissey on Nana Burke, and Niall Quinn on James Regan, or Dara Burke, say for example. You'll have midfield battle, maybe Alex Kinnear on David Burke, or Bernard Burke on Niall Morrissey. Like there's battles all over, and the big one obviously is Joseph Cooney and Conor Cooney. Like the battle of the Cooneys, like that's likely going to be the matchup that could decide the game. Like I don't think, like, no disrespect to any other forward in Galway at the moment, but like over the last 7-8 years, there hasn't been a better player in Galway than Conor Cooney. Like but on the other end, maybe there hasn't been a better number 6 than Joseph Cooney either. Like so, it's going to be a fascinating battle, and that's potentially where it could be won. Like, see at the other end, then you have Kevin Cooney maybe going against Fintan Burke, and like his pace has trouble Fintan at times. Like, and we saw that in the game earlier on this year, where like he likes to run at him, but like it's not as easy to build up that head of steam this time of year either. And the ground is soft, and the ball doesn't hop up at your hand, and Fintan is a fantastic spoiler in that sense. And there's fascinating matchups all over. You've probably John Cooney at centre forward, maybe someone like Keane Mahoney could pick up him. There's just huge battles all over the field. It's a fascinating tie. But if you were to pick a matchup that could potentially define it, it'd probably be Conor Cooney and Joseph Cooney, really, and whoever can emerge victorious from that, it'll have a huge say in proceedings and could potentially swing the tie in their side's favour. Yeah,
and as you mentioned, like Joseph Cooney had to go on to Joe Canning, and maybe it's something Sarsfield's management have kind of realised now, because you could see kind of Joseph Cooney wanted to sit, I suppose, as that 6 in the pocket, but then someone had to go out and Joe, and I suppose, like as you mentioned there, it's the exact same with Conor Cooney this weekend.
Yeah, and there's we even starts the last day, like Conor Cooney started in full forward just to kind of mix things up. He went in, and it throws a cat amongst the pigeons straight away. So you always remember Kilkenny when they were going well with Henry Shefflin, and Henry Shefflin could start the game on who they determined will be the weakest link. So he might start in corner forward on the potentially the weakest of the 6 backs, corner back, and you might see that element. But like Thomas's could do that, just upset it a small bit, and then he could come back out on it, Joseph Cooney, because Sarsfields definitely won't want Joseph Cooney, want Joseph Cooney back corner back. But then you've a Kevin Hines or a Darren Morrissey to kind of slot in there, and they can decide amongst the mix. Matchups are so important now this time of year. They're absolutely pivotal. So it's getting it right. And as you said, if you maybe leave Conor Cooney in the space that Joe Cooney or Joe Kenning got at the weekend, the game could be over as well pretty quickly, because he's capable of doing that much damage. So yeah, I'd be very surprised if Conor Cooney's on the half forward line and Joseph Cooney isn't standing beside him at the weekend.
Are you surprised in somewhat that these games are in Pearse Stadium? Because I suppose last weekend we didn't see one game in Pearse Stadium, and now the semi-finals are here.
No, because the pitches they took a fierce battering. There's no point in saying otherwise. You look out there, at the rain today, and it's monsoon conditions, and that like 2 games in Kenny Park would have taken a lot out of it. You could see the surface water was hanging there after the second game. Like there was literally lightning and thunder during into the Thomas's game, and there was every chance if like there was more than 5 or 10 minutes left that game could have been called off given the conditions. So I'd imagine the damage that was done, a double header on that pitch would have probably wrecked us. And same, maybe Duggan Park got a bit of the better weather, but maybe Duggan Park maybe couldn't probably hold the crowd of a Galway senior hurling double header. So like, and I suppose the reason the games weren't on in Pearse Stadium at the weekend is because the pitch needed to be kept for the football final. Like it was the biggest game at the weekend. There's no point in saying otherwise. So like you need to mind it. So I suppose one game at the weekend in Pearse Stadium probably less damage done. It probably is the surface that's probably still standing at this point. And I personally would prefer the games in Athenry. I make no qualms about that. You would get a better crowd, bigger atmosphere. Pearse Stadium is too big for something like this, in my opinion. But needs must, and I suppose it is good to have the pitch there, probably in decent condition. Like I suppose like the only other option is Tuam. Like, but like, are you really going to get a hurling double header in Tuam? Probably not. Like, so Pearse Stadium is the way to go. And I can understand the decision. Like, it's now, as I said, it's not my preferred venue. I'd prefer to see in Athenry or even Ballinasloe, but needs must at this time of year.
Just on that first semi-final, to get a prediction, like as we mentioned, huge opportunity for Sarsfields, but is your gut feeling just still telling you Thomas's? Yeah,
it would be still. It's hard not to fancy them at this when they get to this time of year. I suppose it's a good. If you're going to catch them, maybe semi-final might be the way to do it. So that's what Sarsfields will be looking at. They just have this way of finding a way to win a game. Like when they look under pressure, they just able to come up with the scores. Like there's countless probably occasions maybe where they might have been beaten. Like like Thurlock a couple of years ago in the county final, they looked like they had them, and then they managed to pull it out and a big finish. I suppose Clarinbridge were 10 points up with and Thomas's were minus Fintan Burke, David Burke, and Thomas has found a way to turn it around. Like it's just you couldn't knock back them just given the evidence. And they have hugely physical players. You've like Fintan, you've Cathal Burke, you've Dara Burke, you've Conor Cooney, like you've Bernard Burke, you've David Burke, you've guys made for these type of conditions as well. And they're well able for it. Like I'd expect it to be a very close game. I don't see Thomas's winning easy or anything like that. I think Sarsfields are going to give them a real game, and like if Sarsfields were to beat them, I wouldn't be massively surprised or anything like that. But my gut like does say Thomas is probably will get over the line again. I don't imagine by much. I'd expect it to be maybe a couple of points at most, maybe, and see from there.
Just on one of the quarterfinal results over the weekend, Loughrea 122, Turlockmore 216. Loughrea remain the only unbeaten team left in this championship, and it still feels like a significant result. But ultimately, after the weekend, they're still not favourites. And like I'd say, there's definitely now a few people who are definitely worth probably sticking a punt on Loughrea for this championship, because for a lot of people, I suppose like every year they felt this was Turlock's year to break through.
Yeah. Now, in fairness to Turlock, they've had a few injuries this year as well, which happen to help. Like you've Daniel Loftus only coming on the last day. Like he's a serious loss. Like he's been one of their best defenders out there. Like you've Conor Walsh's absence as well, which doesn't help. You've a host of young players still developing. Like you have your own Keneally's and your Matthew Tarpey's and fellas like this that are still coming through. So yeah, they're like Turlock are going to be there or thereabouts. They've too much talent coming through every year and playing in 8 competitions not to. But I suppose like this is like I have been so impressed with Loughrea this year. Like every hurl they seem to have meeting and they seem to have overcome. Like and like you look at it, it's such a young team. Like it's like you've Shane Morgan cornerback with Kieran Hanrahan. You have like you've Joseph Mooney, you've Tiernan Killeen, you've Martin McNannis, like you've these guys, and you've bench players like the 2 Shaughnessy's as well to come on. Like and you've a lot of options there. Like in a Loughrea arguably have probably maybe the best squad in the competition. And like they only brought on Cayman Killeen at the weekend and Sean Sweeney, like who are also coming back from injury. And Shane O'Brien as well is another really good forward, and always capable of sniping the score. Like, I wasn't overly surprised that Loughrea won. Like, I actually kind of fancied Loughrea given their form, and they had 6 weeks to prepare, and they have a really good management team. Like, Tommy Kelly is, renowned statistician. He's taken over this year. Like, I know he's worked with Matty Kinney in the past. And like, you look at their backroom, like you've Greg Kennedy, Gavin Carey, you've like Shane Cusick, Nigel Murray. Like, you've lads with huge experience and lads who worked in elite setups, and like Ray have plenty of talent, and like there's like they're I wasn't overly surprised. I suppose like my biggest surprise was they didn't win it earlier than they did. They had they were 6-1 up, and it looked like they were going to blow Turlock away, and Turlock somehow, like, without probably doing 20% of the hurling Loughrea had, they managed to get their noses in front of half time after Jamie Holland goal. Like Loughrea then, like they came back again, they built up a bit of a lead, but then they had a Sucker Poe Joan goal when kind of a nothing really delivery by Dahi Burke, kind of maybe a mishit one, was turned into his own net by Paul Hubin, and still they managed to recover and eke out the win. And it was very impressive. Like, there's no point in saying otherwise. Like, you'd huge scorers. Like Neil Carey scored 3 points in play. Like, Anthony Burns scored 3 points in play. Martin McManus finished with 4, and like Martin McManus looked unmarkable at the weekend.
Yeah, from right to left, like turning everything, and like with that as well. I know you're referencing Jamie Ryan's performance, but they really did look devastating in attack.
Absolutely. What I found very interesting was Turlock, we spoke on how Joseph Cooney was switched across onto Joe Canning. Like Turlock kind of held their positions for a long time. Like, they didn't really make the switches that maybe try something else on Jamie Ryan, maybe try something else on Martin McManus. Like, they kind of held, like, they kept Dahi at 6. Now, I know he's such an influential figure, but maybe put Dahi on Jamie Ryan for a couple of minutes to try and stifle his influence. And like, I was like, and like, obviously I'm not criticizing anyone or not saying anything, but I was just a bit curious to see how long they kind of persisted with the matchups they had. Like, it was interesting because like Turlock have a lot of defenders, and they've a lot of capable. Like, they're very, very strong defensively. Like, I would have expected to maybe see a couple of minute changes. Like, I'm not saying like make subs or anything like that, but maybe switch a couple of players here and there just to kind of curb the Loughrea attack. And maybe I felt maybe they were slight bit slow on doing that, but maybe just the form Loughrea, and maybe I'm being overly harsh as well, that Loughrea were they were really on it. Like, you'd 15 points to play from Burns, McManus, Neil Carey, and Jamie Ryan. Like, it's like Turlock didn't come anywhere near scoring like that tally from their forward line, and in the end that was the difference.
Their opponents as well, Loughrea, I suppose, in the semi-final this weekend, Clarinbridge, they come over. Tommy Larkins, the 3 goals in the second half just ultimately won them that contest. But like, I know there's a strong breeze in Everton, but I think it was 8 points down at halftime. Like, they looked in like a bit of bother, but it's maybe, I suppose, something Clarinbridge have done this year throughout the championship. Like, their second half performance has been a lot stronger than their first.
Yeah. There was a really, maybe a tricky enough wind, and I don't know if you've seen it. It was referenced on the stream, and that there was a bit of a schmozzle before throwing as well between, like, as in Clarinbridge or Tommy Larkins were warming up, and Clarinbridge were warming up behind the goal. They were doing their initial warm up, and they came in, and there was a bit of. Now, I didn't actually see it, so I can't really comment on it. I wasn't there for the game. But I heard, like, so maybe that stirred Larkins at the start, and maybe it didn't have the required effect from Clarinbridge, but like, maybe turning it around. Like, you look at Clarinbridge's attack, like, it's phenomenal really on paper. Like, you've TJ Brennan, you've Gavin Lee, you've Evan Island, you've Mark Kennedy, you've Keane Salmon, you've Niall Armstrong to come on if Mikey Daly isn't firing on all cylinders. Like, they have huge options in attack. Like, it's no surprise that they're capable of turning it around and getting the scores necessary. I suppose at the other ends, like, they did a really good job on, like, Clarinbridge's strong trio, like their heavy duty trio so far this year, in Jason Flynn, Conor Gardner, Ronan Murphy. I think what they combined, the 3 boys only scored like a handful of points between them. Like, whereas they'd racked up coming into this game, that 826 from play between that trio alone. So like, that's a huge sign that the defense is going well as well. It was a game of 2 halves, the classic game of 2 halves, where the wind is going to have a huge bearing, and maybe when Clarinbridge got their backs up, they, maybe Tommy Larkins had no answers, and I suppose like that attack, like as a reference, it's phenomenal. Like it takes a lot of watching, and you need to get your matchups on the money to kind of thwart their threat.
Is this semi-final now, do you feel, between Clarinbridge and Loughrea? Like, because, like, geez, even there when you're mentioning the sets of forwards lines, it definitely has me excited anyways for this weekend.
Yeah, it's if only we could get the weather.
Yeah, that's the thing.
A good day like this would be 3-23 to 4-19 or something like that. That scoreline wouldn't surprise me at all. Like these two teams met last year and they played out, I think it was 112 to 1-9 or something like that. But like the weather was horrendous conditions. I think it was like Clarinbridge obviously prevailed, but I do think Loughrea have come on a lot since that game. They've improved noticeably. I suppose the proof will be in the pudding in the semi-final, but like it should be a case of two forwards, but like this time of year, it's defenders' weather. There's no point in saying otherwise. Like you'll have your Johnny Cohen, like, and Paul Hooban, and you're from the opposite side. You'll have your Oisín Salmon and Phelan McCann, and your Connor Lees maybe, and your Shane Rhines and Shane Bannons. Like they'll thrive in this weather. It's defenders' weather. So like I'd love to say we'll have a shootout, but perhaps we won't, because the weather is going to unfortunately have its. I think maybe if you could score maybe 23, 24 points, it'd probably do enough for you in this one. Maybe even less if the weather stays like it is today.
Yeah, no, even as you mentioned there, like it's nearly a common theme now with the breeze, and in Pearse Stadium, like it's probably definitely going to have a factor this weekend.
Yeah, and like when you have someone like Evan Nyland and on freeze from a Clarinbridge point of view, like we saw in the county final last year, he was able to float stuff up from his own like half back line, like out near the sideline, like just phenomenal shooters. So like that's discipline is hugely important from a Loughrea point of view, and I suppose they were very good at that at the weekend. Like Sean Loftus had 5 frees and he scored them all. But that's Loughrea didn't cough up a lot of frees, like which is a good sign when you're playing a team like Clarinbridge, who Evan Island can do some amount of damage when if you're indisciplined in the tackle or you're a tad lazy or anything like that. So like that is a good sign from a Loughrea point of view. So if they can keep that going at the weekend, and like I suppose it's probably a small bit different coming up as well, because we touched on the Clarinbridge attack. Like maybe they're a bit more devastating, we'll say, than what Turlock had to offer. So maybe it was a bit easier for Loughrea not to cough up as many frees. But when you have Mark Kennedy, TJ Brennan, Keane Salmon, like you're Gavin Lee, you're going to draw frees, I suppose, and then you have the man, maybe the best man in the county for finishing them off in Evan Island.
If I'm not wrong, it was Johnny Cohen who stepped up for that Loughrea penalty. Like it was just surprising, I suppose, to see him step up when you consider the forwards that they do have.
Yeah. Johnny's taken a few penalties from Loughrea, and he's usually found the target, funnily enough. You're going down the list of Galway hurlers that you think were going to take a penalty, and maybe he'd be towards the bottom of the list. But geez, he made a great strike. Like Mark Fahey is a goalkeeper who was in with Galway in the past. Like he'd be one of the most like highly rated club goalies in the county anyway. And he made no mistake in the finish. He made a very clean connection, and it was a really good penalty from Johnny. So like I suppose you go down to the options. Maybe they don't feel Loughrea. Maybe they don't feel they have a better striker of the ball in terms of that. And I suppose pressure from Johnny Cohen's point of view, like he'd be well used to the pressure at this point, having played in all Ireland finals for Galway and county finals for Loughrea as well. So like he did a brilliant job to finish it, and it was probably the match winning score for a finish.
And who are you giving the advantage to this one, David, in the, I suppose, second semi-final, 2:15 on Sunday in Pearse Stadium?
Loughrea, I think they have been more consistent this year. I think they've been really good. As I said, I've been hugely impressed with them. I think they've come on a lot since last year. That's not to say Clarinbridge, Clarinbridge will go. A Clarinbridge win wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. But I do I do think Loughrea are going to make the breakthrough this year and reach the county final. And it like if only the weather gods would play ball. That's all I'd say. It'd be a fantastic game, and it would be a shootout. But it's going to be interesting to see how two teams cope. And as I said, I think what's 112 to 1-9 last year. I'd be very surprised if it's that low scoring this time round. But looking out there today, you'd never know.
I get the sense from like you're talking there about Loughrea, like that there is a lot of excitement, and justifiably so, with the performances throughout the championship. But you obviously believe that Loughrea can get their hands on a county title this year.
Yeah, well, I absolutely see no reason why any of the teams couldn't. Being honest with you, now I do. Like just on the kind of the look at the draw, maybe you'd probably push Loughrea just slightly ahead of Sarsfields to do it. But like if Sarsfields were to overcome Thomas's, they'd probably go in as favourites to the final. Maybe it's very difficult to call. But yeah, there's no reason. Loughrea are very exciting. I really enjoyed watching them this year. They've lovely balance of youth and experience. Like you have, as I mentioned, the young players, your Shane Morgans, your Tiernan Killeens. Like Tiernan Killeen is in with the Galway panel, and like maybe he hasn't really hasn't been really one of Loughrea's stars this year so far, which is telling in itself. Given it just shows the quality that they have. They probably have Jamie Ryan maybe hadn't had his best season up until last weekend, and he just seems to be coming into a real bit of form like now, and like his pace is incredible. So yeah, I see no reason why if they were to meet Thomas's in the final, like that they couldn't give them a real game and overcome them. But I suppose it's about getting there first. And Clarinbridge aren't an easy, as runners up last year, they aren't an easy hurdle to overcome. Like, and they'll fancy their chances as well. Like, and they'll be looking to right the wrongs of last year's championship. And they probably will have learned a lot from that defeat in Pearse Stadium and the £10 turnaround to Thomas's as well. So they'll be eagerly excited as well coming into the semi-final, because for them it's kind of a shot for nothing really. Loughrea are going to be fancied probably to beat them at this point, so they'll be saying why not, why can't we do it? Like we've shown consistency over the last couple of years, and we're back in the semi-final again. So yeah, they're hugely exciting games. But I'm really looking forward to them. I think it is the four best teams left in the competition at this point. I don't think anyone could argue that at this juncture. And it's rare it happens, by the look of the draw. But I think these are the four best teams left, and it sets us up to to have a really good double header at the weekend in Pearse Stadium.
Yeah, no, as you mentioned there, it definitely does set it up really nicely for the weekend. Two cracking semi-finals in store. As I mentioned early on, Sarsfields and Thomas's, the curtain raiser at 12:30, and then at 2:15, you have Loughrea and Clarinbridge in the second semi-final. And as we were saying, here's hoping the weather will stay away for one day and lead to two cracking contests. That's all on our hurling show for today. David Connors, thanks a million for your time.
No bother, Pat.